Hi there, and today we're here with Benny from Benny's Custom Works and his world famous Cresta. Now it's been a long time since we've seen this thing. It's had a heap of technical development. Today's the day we'll go through, have a bit of a look at it and fit one of the new Haltech PDMs. Benny, it's always a pleasure having you here.
No, thanks for having me.
Mate, I'm sorry it's been so long. So it's probably been about 4 or 5 years since we had this car here at Haltech. It's gone through a heap of different generations, a heap of modifications. And before we get to fitting a PDM and doing the next generation of engine management part on this thing, we should probably know a bit about the car. So last time I saw it, it was running high nines, 140-ish mile an hour.
Yeah, I think somewhere around that. It was so long ago, I can't even remember those numbers. It's kind of snowballed and changed so many times where we've got to the point now it's run 812 at 165. So it kind of, you know what it's like, scope creep. Oh, I'll run a 90, I'll run an 850, I now want to run a 7, and it's just kind of add bits, change bits.
So before we get into the electronics part of it, we'd better get a bit of a recap of what's actually in this thing now. So engine, turbo, gearbox, tell us a bit about it.
Well, let's dive on in and have a look.
So Benny, it's looking a hell of a lot nicer in here than I remember. This is like a proper race car now.
No, thanks mate. There's been a lot of changes. This is about the 7th revision. It's about the 4th different engine and turbo combo we've had. But now we've kind of gone next level. We've got Empire EMR 1200 short block with one of their head packages as well. We've actually gone away from a traditional head gasket. We've got a copper gasket with a beryllium firing in it. The firing, hasn't that changed a lot of the way that everyone's going? That's a game changer, hey, like everyone goes firing combos now. The turbo, we're on our 3rd turbo now. This is a Garrett G45 1500. Mm-hmm. Still kind of learning this thing. It's pretty much brand new. It's only been on the car for 1 day. So yeah, we're still kind of at the tuning at the track stage with it. Kind of gone away from dyno tuning it, to be honest, because we've just been tinkering around at the track.
Well, look, if you've got your setup there, if you've got all your data, if you've got all your drive shaft curves, it's probably a really good point that if you've got an engine management system that does have the ability to pull all that data, that once you've got that base there, when you're making those small changes, track tuning is definitely a thing, especially for a car making this much power.
It's definitely allowed us to develop the car a lot quicker and be able to make changes at the track. And previously we've had some rotary trims set up on the dash that have allowed me to sort of tune within the parameters you guys have preset. But now we're actually going to go away from that as well to try and get some I/O back into the ECU. And we're also going to be putting a CAN keypad in today, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the whole combo is still evolving. Like we've now got a reed case transmission. We've gone away from the traditional coilover plug style ignition system as well. We've got a set of IGM 1As from you guys as well, with some nice leads. They're remote mounted. Few reasons we've done that. For serviceability, it's literally 10 seconds to do plugs in this thing now. And also we've actually taken the coils away from the heat of the engine. So they're now mounted in direct airflow on the strut towers. So it's becoming more and more reliable, and it's at the point now where we've got to find all these tiny little things to kind of keep honing the car and making it faster.
I suppose for today's topic, this engine package, it's gotten super serious. You've added a whole bunch more sensors, and because of that, we need to figure out how to best prioritize the I/O or the inputs and outputs on the engine management system. So tell us what sensors that we're going to be mucking around with today.
So things that we've added, we've got coolant temperature and pressure. The Barra, interestingly, doesn't run a coolant temp sensor at all. So I'm thinking we're actually going to replace the cylinder head temp input with the coolant temp input.
Perfect.
So we don't change the I/O there, but we do need to add coolant pressure. We've also got laser ride height in the front, gear position sensor on the transmission, and we've also got rear shock travel sensor. And I also want to re-add the transmission temperature because we actually moved some stuff around previously and prioritized another input, which was one of our rotary trims. But now that we've gone to the CAN keypad, we're going to get 3 AVIs back. So between sort of shuffling all of that around, I think we'll be able to get everything working pretty well. Be able to get rid of our current I/O box because it's pretty old, and same thing, I want to have replaceable parts on the track, so I can get a spare PD16 if I need it, but it's just about making the system more refined and easily serviceable.
Okay, so this probably brings up a really good point that this has got an Elite 2500 ECU, so that's got our 34 pin and our 26 pin ECU connector. there's only so many inputs and outputs we can put in an engine management system before it simply runs out of real estate on that connector. The option to move forward from there is either to add an I/O expander, to go to something like our R5 series ECU, which is the 5 connector unit, or add something like the Haltech PDM, the power distribution module, which has got more purpose than simply supplying power out to devices. It's an awesome thing for powering thermofans, fuel pumps, ignition systems, all sorts of stuff, doing all of your current reporting so you can see how much current each device is actually pulling. You can get stats on that and you can see if maybe a pump starts to pull more current than normal, so you can start to pinpoint issues before they happen. However, it's also got a bunch of inputs as well. So the device does work like an input expander, so that when we put it, say, in the back of a car, for example, we might be able to put fuel level, 2 shock sensors, we might be able to do some flex fuel, speed sensor, maybe a fuel pressure or fuel tank in the temperature in the back. If we put it in the front of the car, we can put it next to the engine management system. And then, like you're saying, we don't have to prioritize which sensor can we add because we've run out of inputs. So today, we'll be setting up the PDM down at the passenger's feet. All of these extra sensors that we're talking about, we'll prioritize those so that any of the sensors that need high speed sampling or any of the inputs that need to have a really fast reaction time, things like shock travel or trans brake release, stuff like that, we'll put into the main engine management system. Any of the devices that have got we'll call a slower sample speed, so up to 50 hertz or 50 times a second, we'll put into the PDM, then we'll configure all of that stuff.
So I've already got the PDM actually mounted and in the car. I've got the main power supply cable already run because I know that's a bit fiddly and I didn't know if we were going to actually have access to the hoist today. Luckily we do, and now we don't need it, so that's great. And we've also run all of our sensor wiring from all of our new sensors already in the car, and hopefully I didn't cut them too short.
You know what my least favourite thing is?
Is it running wires into the car?
It's running. I'm more than happy to terminate on either end. I love all of that.
It's just running the wires?
Running the wires. I second guess it every time because I want it to be perfect.
It took me out. I've done a whole video just on wiring like 5 sensors.
Well,
it was a painful video, but you can check it out on my channel.
It's basically Benny just pulling cable out and just placing it and then just having open ends so that we can do this today easily and efficiently.
I terminated the sensor ends.
Oh, this is even better.
It's only got to get terminated onto the dash.
All right, well, hopefully this will only be a couple of minutes. This might be like one of those clip scenes where you just go...
Gonna have a montage.
And it's done. So the main job for today will be removing the device power supplies that are currently routed through the fuse and relay box, then connecting those supplies to be controlled directly by the PD16. We'll also be utilising the extra inputs of the PD16, which means we can add extra sensors that Benny's already run wiring for, essentially making the PDM an input expander as well. Now, Benny, before we start cutting any wires in here, can you just give me a brief rundown of sort of what the buttons are doing? And, well, you're holding some trim knobs. Let's start with the trim knobs.
Yep, so these were our rotary trim modules, which we were using for torque management, scaling, boost control, and launch RPM settings.
Okay, so these used to be an analog input. So each one of the trim modules had a 5 volt, a signal ground, and an analog voltage input that went into the ECU. The ECU would then look at the 0 to 5 volt signal coming out of that device up to 12 different positions. So then you've got 12 positions for, well, basically anything you want. So target boost pressure, launch RPM, stuff like that, super common. The way that we're going to change this to free up some analog inputs and the way that we do stuff now, 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah, well, this is definitely, these were in the car to some extent from day one. We had a single rotary trim and then we've added them over time. So yeah, going forward, it's obviously trying to minimize the inputs to the ECU where we can maximize CAN data.
Yeah. So that's what we'll be doing today. So freeing up 3 analog inputs on the system is as easy as adding a CAN keypad. So we've got a 15 button keypad in here now. So that button is an on-off button, but each button has got 3 lights across the top as well. So that means that we can do like a momentary press on that button. So if you don't press it, that's position 0. You press it once, the first light comes on. You press it twice, the second light. 3 times, the third light. So that's 4 positions in one button. Or we can also marry 2 buttons together and have a up and a down button to have a total of 7 positions for whatever you like. Now, what else have we got over here that we're going to be replacing today?
So under the dash, we've currently got one of the Platinum Series IO boxes, and we've also got a Haltech fuse box.
Okay.
So I'd like to try and integrate all of that into the PD16 because like I said before, it's about making what we've got be as efficient as possible and serviceable as possible. So I think having all the current reporting of the PD16, it's just going to be invaluable if we're at drag week on the side of the road with continually breaking something. You can pull up the report and go, oh, cool, we've got 20 amps of current draw on this pin when it should be 12 or whatever. You go, oh, cool, we'll go and look at fuel pump or fan power supply or whatever whatever the issue is we're having, we can look at it instantly rather than chase stuff and have test lights and stuff. Like, I mean, obviously it's good to have that traditional diagnostic sometimes, but if you've got it, why not use it?
Mate, spot on. Okay, so if we've got a fuse, the Haltech fuse box in there, the old style one that used the 6 Bosch relays with the 6 wedge style fuses, we'll chop that out and we'll repin that into the PDM. And then you also said it's got a Platinum IO box. OG, which at the time, fantastic product at the time. It's can based.
To be fair, it's worked flawlessly. Like, that's been in the car for at least 5 years. Like, I think we added that in the first electronic revision of the car. So,
all right. Well, look, that thing has 4 analog inputs, 4 digital inputs, and 4 digital outputs. It's can based to go into the ECU. So the downfall of the IO box for me was that AMP, the plug, the electrical connector on that device. So I'll be happy to see that go. And then when we're into the PDM actually uses the AMP 1mm Super Seal plug and pin. So the same pin set that you use on most common popular engine management systems.
Yeah.
They crimp nice. They're really, really easy to get pins in and out of the connectors. So I'm looking forward to taking that plug off the IO box and updating that a little bit. All right, well, we know what we need to do, so now we've actually got to do some work. There's a bunch of repinning to do, but you know who's real good at repinning?
Not me.
I can do it, but I really like watching Davo do it, and Dave loves doing this sort of stuff. So
Dave is the gun.
I think we'll grab Davo, I'll pull everything mechanically down, we'll know exactly what's going on, and we'll get a bit of a hand from Davo. I'm pretty keen to do some crimping.
I'll ring tech support.
Let's do it.
Traditionally, when using a relay to switch a high current device, the 12-volt power supply would come from the battery positive terminal through a fuse to pin 30. That supply goes through a high current switch inside the relay and out of pin 87 to the high current device you'd like to control, something like a fuel pump or a thermofan. In order to switch the high current side of the relay, we need a low current switch. This is typically a ground switch from the ECU to pin 86. Pin 85 of the relay would be connected to the switched 12-volt supply to complete the circuit. And this is how, with the aid of a relay, you can use a low current switch or ECU output to turn a high current device on and off. Now, things get a lot simpler when you start to use the PD16. A single power cable runs from the battery positive to the PD16 power lug. Then, a single high current wire runs to the device positive terminal, and that's it. So if you're moving from a traditional fuse and relay block setup, all you need to do is remove the wire on pin 87 from your old relay setup, crimp a pin on it and feed it into one of the outputs on the PD16 connector. Then, that's it. You simply chuck out the rest.
So I've swapped out Benny for Davo. Davo's in here getting hard at work in the footwell. While Davo's doing that, I'm doing a firmware update on the Elite Series ECU. We're bringing it into the Nexus software package, and I'm bringing it up to version 3.04. So that's the first firmware version that supports the Haltech PDM series. As soon as this firmware gets into the unit, the best way to go about this is we're going to remove the IO box one by one. So I've already recorded the IO, the input-output setup from the map that's in the engine management system. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to go through input by input, output by output. So the first one is going to be the transmission temperature that's currently on the old Platinum IO box. I'm going to reassign it to the PDM. Then I'm going to yell out to Davo and say, please remove AVI 1, for example, from the IO box. Please put an AMP 1mm Super Seal on it. Put it into the PDM connector. Plug it in. I'll reassign it. We'll tick it off. Then we'll move along to the next step. We're going to do that for the whole IO box. We're also going to do that for the Haltech fuse box assembly, and we're going to move all of the supplied power outs from the Haltech fuse box into the PDM. Then we'll be able to move that fuse box all together. In this particular car, the starter motor is done through a relay in that box as well. So in this particular case, we're also going to convert it so that when we twist the key, that signal will go into the ECU. The ECU will then look if the car's in park or in neutral, in a safe position to start. That'll be based on the position sensor that we're about to set up as well. Then it'll send the signal out to the starter motor to get the thing to run. Davo's still furiously wiring over here, but one of the things that I did want to point out about the PDM is it's got a whole bunch of current controlling features. So the first thing that we're going to do on this car, the thermofans, which normally used to turn on and off on a conventional relay, now we're going to pulse those outputs. So as the engine warms up, the fans will slowly start to speed up until it comes fully up to temperature, and then we can turn those fans on flat out. Now, one of the advantages of that is if you've got a really big set of fans on the car, when the fans turn on, it doesn't immediately shock load the electrical system and pull the whole engine down and then make the idle control struggle against it. They come up nice and smooth, and the operator of the car really won't even notice that the fans have turned on. Like I spoke about before, obviously you can measure all of the current draw of the devices on the unit so that you can see that your thermofan is pulling 8 amps today, and if you start hearing it sound funny or there's a bearing problem or something like that, and then all of a sudden it's pulling 15, 18, 20 amps, we can obviously set the fuse current. So I might say I'll have a break at 20 amps and then retry. Keep retrying for, let's say, 10 times. If it retries 10 times and it still can't turn that fan on without going over current, we'll put on an engine check light and tell the driver that something's gone wrong. Another really nice feature of the PDM is the safe state. So when I'm configuring it in here, if something goes wrong with the cabling or we have a CAN communications problem between the PDM and the engine management system, we can also set safe states. So for example, if at the moment Davo over here unplugs our CAN communication cable, all of a sudden the device will go offline. All of the outputs from the unit, for example, the thermofans will go flat out so that they're in the safest state they could possibly be in. If we've got a nitrous solenoid, for example, the safe state with that would be off, so that we can go through and we can set all of the states for all of the devices in the case of a communication error. Well, Benny, it's the moment of truth. We've actually done a little bit more wiring than we expected. So we were going to do the I/O box and put the PDM in and take the fuse box assembly out, but we did get a little bit carried away, and we've now taken out a bunch of solid state relays that we're going to use for the trans brake. We've done the reverse lights. We've got your Prindle stick, so your park, reverse, neutral.
Yeah.
And we've configured that through the PDM just using the software so that...
No actual inhibitor wiring anymore.
No inhibitor wiring, that's all gone. So if it's not in park or neutral, the starter motor's not going to go, it's not going to fire.
And also now we've got full key, like smart start, you flick the key and it cranks now.
Spot on, yep.
Rather than it being old school, hold the key and so you just walk up and it starts now, so that's pretty cool.
Software configuration for stuff like now, so through the park reverse, so through the stalk, when you put it into reverse, the ECU, the PDM I should say, has got an output that goes to the reverse lights and turns those on. And because this thing's got a trans brake, when you put it in reverse, it also triggers the trans brake in order to get the thing to reverse up, which is something that's important so that Benny doesn't have to press another button when he's trying to get the thing to back up after doing a burnout. Adding the keypad to it, we didn't really speak about that much, but that gives a heap of flexibility because now that the PDM is driving all of these things directly, we can simply just configure an override switch for things like override for each of the fans, override for the fuel pumps. We've got things in the keypad now. We've got a valet mode for this thing so that when it goes on the boat tomorrow, the next day.
Yeah, a couple of days.
A couple of days to go to drag week in the USA. We've got a combination of buttons, so the thing only gets 20 or 30% throttle, so that a true valet mode, so that when guys are driving it on and off the boats, that they're not going to give it a hard time. So all we need to now, start it up, we'll go through and check everything. Mate, starts bloody good for a race car.
Not bad. Someone did a pretty killer cold start tune.
There we go, so that fan's pulling 10 amps, 9 amps, 10 amps. All right, well, all your current looks good, everything's pretty awesome, so we'll shut this thing down. And mate, I know it's been a big day. Look, we appreciate you bringing the car in.
Thank you, I appreciate the help.
Mate, we can get a PDM in it and get everything happening before you take it to drag week, which now you've got a whole bunch of stuff on board. Mate, what could possibly go wrong?
We'll be right, we'll find something to break.
All right, well guys, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for watching. My name's Scott. Here's Davo, who did all the actual work. Thanks, Benny. Catch you next time.
See you guys.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, smash that like button. We put out a new video every week and sometimes even two. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awesome content.